Hello everyone, welcome to the YouTube channel of Get Set Law by IMS. I'm a verbal ability mentor Sanjana ma'am, and today let's discuss CLAT 2025 English language section. Just a couple of months left to the CLAT examination. I think it's only fit that we go through the passages that were asked, analyze the nature of the passage, the quality of the passages and the questions, right? And obviously it is known that there were certain discrepancies in the answer key, so let's just discuss that as well. All right. So, right at the outset, we'd dive into the first passage here. Now, what I also want you to learn from this video is that the way I'm going to explain the passage to you, perhaps you might not be able to have the luxury of time to explain the passage to yourself in such great detail. But on the off chance that passages of this nature get asked in the exam, how do you think you can manage to read the passage quickly? And by quickly, I mean a passage, let's just say, of this nature, which must be of close to 250 words only in terms of the word limit. You can solve it easily in under 5 minutes. Yes, I'm not kidding. This is something that you can very well manage, provided you pay attention to what I have to say here. All right. So, what I like to do, if I'm giving an exam, I don't have a lot of time to read everything verbatim. I will just focus on the key points or, the key information or whatever little information I'm able to understand. All right, now the first passage here, actually, this is an interesting one. Firstly, it's a narrative piece because the author of the passage, in this case, it is George Orwell. How do you know it is Orwell? Is because when you start to read the questions, the name of the author appears in the questions quite a lot. But surprisingly, the author's name is not mentioned here. All right, so the author here narrates his inclination towards reading, something that he developed right in his childhood. He also looks into the reasons that caused him to feel so close to reading or writing, right? So, from a very early age, he knew that he has to be a writer. That's the first keyword or information that I'm able to understand. Now, when you read further, I had the lonely child's habit of making up stories and holding conversations with imaginary persons. And I think from the very start, my literary ambitions were mixed up with the feeling of being isolated and undervalued. So, if you look at the background of the author, the developmental years of the author, you'll understand that the author growing up always felt isolated and undervalued, because of which he started having conversations with imaginary persons, and this pushed him further towards writing and reading, right? He already knew that he had a facility with words, right? He was already good at it. He had a power of facing unpleasant facts, and he felt that this created a sort of private world in which he could get his own back for his failure in everyday life. All right. Now, further on, he just talks about some more detail, which is he wanted to write enormous naturalistic novels with unhappy endings, full of detailed descriptions and arresting similes, and also full of purple passages in which words were used partly for the sake of their sound. Now, this statement here to me seems important because the author says, I give all this background information. Why? Because he does not think that one can assess a writer's motives. Assessing a writer's motives means comprehending or understanding a writer's motives without knowing something about the writer's early development, which is why the author here talks about his early developmental years as well, so that we're able to assess or understand his motives behind writing. Therefore, this background information is a requirement according to the author because it gives you a lens to view the motive of the writer by looking at his early development. His subject matter will be determined. Now, the next paragraph is nothing. It's an elaboration of the last statement of the first paragraph. The subject matter, what subject matter? Whatever he's going to write. For example, he has to write a certain book. Whatever the subject matter of his writing or his book would be, that gets determined by the age the author lives in, right? Here in this case, when I say author, I'm not talking about the author of the passage. I'm talking about a writer, right? So that gets determined by the age he lives in. At least this is true in tumultuous revolutionary ages like our own, but before he ever begins to write, he will have acquired an emotional attitude from which he will never completely escape. Now, here lies the catch. There is already a fancy word here. If you already know the predetermined meaning of the word that is better, well and good. But even if you do not, I think when you take a look at the word revolutionary, you'll understand something which is adventurous, something that is not very stagnant, something that is not very stable or certain. It is uncertain. So if I have to talk about the meaning of the word tumultuous, I can definitely imply that it has something to do with something which is unstable. By the way, tumultuous actually means topsy-turvy or upside down, right? For example, he always had a tumultuous childhood, right? So I'm just going to give you a word, topsy-turvy. Another word will be capricious, right? Capricious is also very whimsical, upside down, topsy-turvy. All right. Now, the author also talks something about the emotional attitude from which a writer can never escape, right? And therefore, it is the job of a writer to discipline his temperament, because emotional attitude needs to be sort of, controlled. But if he escapes from his early influences altogether, but at the same time, you should not be ignoring your developmental years and influences, because if this happens, the writer will have killed his impulse to write. I think, therefore, there are 4 great motives for writing, at any rate for writing prose. Now, the author further looks into the 4 great motives that pushes somebody to write. All right. Now, you need not understand the last paragraph in due detail. Just focus on sheer egoism. There is aesthetic enthusiasm. That's the second motive. And then the third motive is historical impulse. And then the fourth motive is political purpose. Now, what is sheer egoism? Desire to seem clever, to be talked about, to be popular, to be known, right? To be remembered after death, to get your own back on grow-ups who snubbed you in childhood. Now, that's it. You just have to wait for a question to appear. Now, you need not think in detail, okay, perhaps sheer egoism could involve something else also. No. You don't really have to rack your brains here. Then you have aesthetic enthusiasm, which is desire to share an experience which one feels is valuable, right? And ought not to be missed. Then you have historical impulse, which is desire to see things as they are, to find out true facts and store them up for the use of posterity. And then lastly, you have political purpose, which is desire to push the world in a certain direction, to alter people's idea of the kind of society that they should strive after. A very simple passage. Word limit is also quite on the shorter side. Maximum 250 words here, right? Secondly, if I have to talk about the level of difficulty of this passage, it is a very easy passage, but I will still term it as easy because we do not know the nature of the questions yet. All right. But it is very easy to understand. So not more than 1.5, maximum 2 minutes should be given to this passage, provided you're able to comprehend it fully. You have to understand it well. It can't be now that you're reading it for 2 minutes and all you understand is perhaps the first 2 lines. No, that shouldn't be the case. Right? Let's now take a look at the questions. Now you have the first question for this passage. For the author, aesthetic enthusiasm is an important motive for writing because, and you know what? For a passage so short, I don't think so that there is a chance for us to revisit the passage. But obviously, when you're actually taking the actual exam, it's considered healthy to revisit the passage. But as far as I remember, aesthetic enthusiasm was given in the last paragraph. It's the second motive using which an author, feels persuaded to write, right? So for the author, about aesthetic enthusiasm, which is an important motive for writing. Why? Because it does what? Shapes the thoughts? Not really. It creates an artistic piece that's actually not mentioned. So don't feel confused. Don't just read aesthetic and compare it to artistic. They can be 2 different things. Sometimes we have to just understand the meaning of the word in the context it's given. And let me tell you, students, this is a direct question. Now, the case with the direct question is that you need not overthink. You just locate aesthetic enthusiasm in the paragraph and you read the information that is rendered on it. And then you find out the correct option choice. And it's mentioned aesthetic enthusiasm is something, an idea which you consider valuable, right? Because it becomes invaluable. Right there you have your correct option choice. So the correct option for this question will be option C. Non-utilitarian is not mentioned, so option D is out. All right. That's how quickly you can solve the first question. This was a full score of the first question. Take a look at the next question for the first passage. The author strongly advocates the writers to. So, what does he advocate? All right, look at option A. Avoid any egoistic impression in their work. Let me tell you something. That which is not given. And when I say not given, it shouldn't be given even remotely. Do not choose it. Do not unnecessarily bring it in the picture. So egoistic is not given. All I remember is emotional attitude. So this is out, right? B says be apolitical in their approach. Are you sure that anywhere in the passage the author is advocating the writers to do this? No. Be contemporary in the treatment of their work. Again, this is not mentioned. What is left is D, none of the above. And that's the correct option choice. Because if at all the author is pushing the writers to do something, it is to just understand their early development years, because those years are perhaps what forms the influences for the writers to pursue writing as a profession, right? So option D here is the correct option choice, none of the above. We will now take a look at the next question. Which of the following is a synonym for the word tumultuous? I have already explained the meaning of the word. It means topsy-turvy, upside down, something that is not stable, right? So you have to figure out an option which is a synonym. Chaotic is definitely a synonym for tumultuous because unstable. Turbulent too is a synonym for tumultuous, and disorderly or something which is disorganized too is a synonym for the word tumultuous. This was an easy level question, and the correct option therefore will be D. That's all of the above. Let's read the next question. And what did I tell you in the beginning? And perhaps, students might have felt really perplexed when they must have seen the name of the author. George Orwell's loneliness during childhood led to. So what we could infer is perhaps this article was extracted from something which is written about him, right? So George Orwell's loneliness during childhood led to what, right? So obviously he was suffering from isolation, right? Option A, estrangement with his father. That's not mentioned. Unhappy days. It does seem gloomy when you read that excerpt in the first paragraph, but right off the bat, without the mention of any specific keyword, do not choose option B. C says making up stories, which is eventually what he did. That's how he connected with stories. He was holding conversations with imaginary characters, right? So right off the bat, option C here will be the correct option choice. Unpleasant incidents. No, this is not what his loneliness during childhood led to. Again, this is a superbly easy question, all right? So make sure that you get this correct if you are solving this, as form of a mock, as part of a mock. Let's focus on the next question. Why does Orwell give background information? And in the first paragraph, the last statement itself says that he wishes to provide this background information so that we're able to assess the motive of the writers in wanting to write, right? So look at option A. He had the lonely child's habits absolutely out of context. B says it is essential to know about the motives of the writers, and this is just what I have iterated. This here, option B, is the correct option choice for this question. Option C says because of his historic impulse. Again, this is not relevant to this at all. Aesthetic enthusiasm, again, is wrong because this is something that comes later as part of the 4 different motives which exists according to Orwell. So correct option here will be option B. Let's pay attention to the next question. If the writer escapes from early impulses, he will. Now, that's also mentioned quite clearly. Explicit detail, right? Explicitly in the second paragraph, almost in the beginning, where if a writer, is trying to escape from early impulses or trying to just escape from early emotional impulses, he will kill his urge to write. That's clearly mentioned. So right off the bat, option A is the correct option choice. Rest of the options you can absolutely eliminate. Why? Can I say this again is a direct question? Yes, it's a direct question. For direct questions, students always remember, why don't you just locate this in the passage? Once you figure out the terminology used here, which is escaping from early impulses, you just read the background information given above it, below it. basically to gauge the context in which this phraseology is mentioned, right? So this way you will never ever incorrectly answer direct questions. All right. So correct option here will be option A. So this was actually a very easy passage. To me, this was a full scorer. There are 6 questions, full 6 marks you could have easily achieved. Let's now focus on the next passage. The next passage focuses on the importance of education, right? And the author now will want to list down some attributes, the utility of having the right sort of education, especially in the context of India. And he refers to India in the passage as the land of Bharat. Again, you need not read this passage verbatim. I will tell you how many minutes exactly you need to read and comprehend this kind of a passage. So, right at the outset, it says education is not the amount of information that is put into your brain and runs right there undigested all your life. So now in the first paragraph, one thing that I'm able to comprehend is that the author is trying to figure out the right definition of education. To him, it is not the amount of information that you load, right? In fact, on the contrary, we must have a life building, man making, character making assimilation of ideas. Assimilation here implies the ideas coming together, right? So, character making, man making, life building assimilation of ideas. Now, if education were identical with information, now students listen to me, here lies a catch. Learn to read every statement correctly. Nowhere in the passage is it mentioned that education is the same as information. The author is just trying to think of a hypothetical situation where if you likened education to information, that being the case, then the libraries are the sages in the world and the encyclopedias are the rishis, right? I don't know what is the importance of the statement. I will just leave it at that. I will only wait for a question to pop up, which will force me to, think deeply about the statement. But so far, this is all that I understand, right? Getting by heart the thoughts of others in a foreign language and stuffing your brain with them and taking some university degree, you consider yourself educated. Is this education? By the way, students, this is not really a question. It's a rhetorical question. A rhetorical question is a question to which you're not actually expecting a reply because it is, enough in itself. You understand the drift already. So the author is now questioning our fake ideas. Our ideas about education are actually very flawed. We think learning foreign languages, stuffing our brain with random information amounts to education. But is that really what makes us educated, right? What is the goal of your education? Open your eyes and see what a piteous cry for food is rising in the land of Bharat, proverbial for its food. Will your education fulfill this want? So what end purpose, right, is your education serving is what the author is trying to question us on, right? Now, the answer lies in the second paragraph as to what, according to the author, ideal education is. We want that education by which character is formed. Again, keywords, hence I'm highlighting. Strength of mind is increased, intellect is expanded, and by which one can stand on one's own feet, by which one is able to make ends meet, one is able to earn money, right? What we need to study independent of foreign control, different branches of knowledge that is our own. This is what we need to study. This is what education needs to include within its ambit. With it, the English language, Western science, we need technical education and all else that will do what? Develop industries so that men, instead of seeking for service, may earn enough to provide for themselves and sane against a rainy day. Ultimately, should be able to make us earn our own living, right? Without having to beg, without having to serve others. The end of all education, all training should be man making. The end and aim of all training are to make the man grow. Very simple. You just read it for once. A plain reading will suffice. You need not reread this line or paragraph, all right? Focus further. Now, the training by which the correct expression of will are brought under control and become fruitful is called education. Another fancy definition of education, which I will just leave at that. All right, what a country now wants are muscles of iron and nerves of steel. Let me just tell you something. Please don't take this literally. Please don't take this literally because this is just a metaphorical expression that we need a lot of willpower, gigantic wills. All right, willpower so strong that it's comparable to muscles of iron and nerves of steel. That's it. Please don't take this phrase literally. Otherwise, you will end up marking the wrong option. We do have a question coming up on this piece of information itself. Which nothing can resist, which can penetrate into the mysteries and secrets of the universe and will accomplish their purpose in any fashion. Again, if you want, you can skip this statement here because to me it seems very floral, very redundant. I've already understood the gist of this paragraph so far, right? That's how you have to read, right? So practice reading like this while attempting our mocks also. Now, there is only one method of attaining knowledge. Now, this is also important, which is by concentration. The very essence of education is concentration of mind. All right? From the lowest to the highest man, all have to use the same method to attain knowledge, which is concentrating. And an example has been rendered that of a chemist who works in the laboratory, concentrating on elements to analyze them. Knowledge is acquired by concentration, but let me also tell you something. Right now, education was in the beginning compared to information, but it is not actually information. And in the last paragraph also, we're talking about education, but there is a statement which says that one method of attaining knowledge, only one method of attaining knowledge is concentration of mind. I will be smart enough to not think that education here has been compared to knowledge or education here is the same as knowledge. All right? Because there is a question based on this, and I'm just clearing up some things here itself for you. Education is not likened to knowledge. Is that clear? The essence of education is concentration of mind, and through concentration of mind, you attain knowledge. That's it. All right? You can't say education right off the bat is attained through concentration. So don't confuse the two. All right, very simple passage. Okay, this is very descriptive in nature, right? I don't think so there is any analytical part here in the passage. This is not narrative also because it doesn't really have storytelling undertones to it. According to the author, what is it that we need to study? English language, definitely mentioned in the passage. Technical education is also mentioned because we want man-making education, something that helps man grow. Western science as well. So the correct option choice here will be all of the above. This again, students, is a direct question, something which is easily scoreable. All right. We will now focus on the next question. According to the author, which among the following is key to attaining knowledge? All right. That's just one option choice. It's given in the last paragraph. You've just done it. Only one method to attain knowledge is concentration of mind. This is something that you can easily solve through selection. You need not even eliminate, take a look at the rest of the options. Obviously, you can because we would always want to cross-verify, but here you can at least take the liberty of just looking at option C and marking it as the correct option choice. It's a direct question, something which is explicitly mentioned in the passage. Again, very scoreable. Now, the next question here is a vocab-related question because it is asking you to figure out the synonym for assimilation. And the way assimilation is used in the passage, the sentence reads assimilation of ideas, which is coming together of ideas. So integration, which is option A, definitely is close to assimilation. Similarly, adjustment is also a close dupe for the word assimilation, right? Adjusting ideas in relation to each other. And similarly, acclimatization also, which is the same as adjusting, right? It's the same as assimilation. So the correct option choice here will be all of the above, right? This too, according to me, is a very easy question to solve. We will focus on the next question. Education as described by the author means, and I think I have talked about this in much detail while explaining the passage to you. Education, unfortunately, has not been likened to information. Education is not the same as library. Education is not the same as degrees. So the correct option choice will be none of the above. Now just understand something I wanted to share with the students is just because none of the above and all of the above is mentioned does not always mean that you have to choose these options as well. Sometimes we could just give them as strap options. But in the case of CLAT 2025 EL section, obviously, in fact, all of the none of the above questions are correct, right? So option D here is the correct option choice. Let's focus on the next question. As per the author, the aim of education should be building a person's character, helping the person earn his/her livelihood, and expanding the intellect of an individual. All three are mentioned as the aims of education, and therefore, here as well, the correct option choice will be all of the above. Very, very scoreable. Next question. According to the author, the country wants massive willpower, which is true, spirit of philanthropy, which is being altruistic in your approach, helping others. This is not mentioned in the passage, so we cannot choose option B, spirit of philanthropy. If B is something we cannot choose, right of the bat, we can eliminate D, which is all of the above. And I did tell you, iron and steel industries is just used metaphorically. Do not use this literally here in the passage. Correct option choice here will be massive willpower. We want muscles of steel is what is mentioned, right? Gigantic will. So correct option is massive willpower, option A. So the second passage in all students was a very scoreable passage. Again, it was a full scorer, full 6 on 6 you can easily achieve there. We will now focus on the third passage, which is a very interesting, a very fun and an easy read. This is a purely narrative piece and it talks about an astrologer and his day, right? The mundane of his life, something he does on a daily basis. The entire passage is nothing but a narration of the same. So we will read this. Mostly for narrative passages, I would suggest you read everything word for word because you never know. A question on even the most small or minute of detail could be asked. All right. So punctually in midday, he opened his bag, right? So the astrologer here starts his work at midday punctually. He opened his bag and spread out his professional equipment or stuff, which consists of a dozen cowrie shells, a square piece of cloth with obscure mystic charts on it. Now, you need not understand everything that's laid out, as part of his professional equipment. Just give it a simple reading, right? Just let your mind process the information. There's a notebook and there's a bundle of Palmyra writing. Now, his forehead was dazzling with sacred ash and vermilion, which is like a reddish color of sorts, and his eyes sparkled with a sharp abnormal gleam, which was really an outcome of a continual searching look for customers, but which his simple clients took to be a prophetic light and felt comforted. So his sparkly eyes is what his simple clients took to be a prophetic light and felt comforted. And another description that's given of the astrologer is the fact that his forehead was dazzling with the color red. All right. The power of his eyes was considerably enhanced by their position. Right. Again, I'm just leaving this part. Just let it be. If you want, you can read it again. People were attracted to him as bees are attracted to cosmos or dahlia stalks. He sat under the boughs of a spreading tamarind tree, which flanked a path running through the town hall park. Now, this path, running through the town hall park, it was a remarkable place in many ways. A surging crowd, an increasing crowd, was always moving up and down this narrow road, morning till night. And the most important bit, because we actually have a question coming up on it, a variety of trades and occupations were represented all along its way. Right? What trades and occupations are talked about? Let's take a look at them. Medicine sellers, definitely there. Sellers of stolen hardware and junk. Magicians, and above all, an auctioneer of cheap cloth who created enough din all day to attract the whole town. All right, that's it. So in total, we have medicine sellers, sellers of stolen hardware, which is 2, 3 magicians, and an auctioneer of cheap cloth. So these 4 professions are mentioned. That's it. Read further. Next to him in vociferousness. Vociferousness is, to talk about something in a very loud and confident manner, right? Came a vendor of fried groundnut who gave his ware a fancy name each day, calling it Bombay ice cream, Delhi almond, Raja's delicacy, and so on and so forth, right? So this vendor of fried groundnut gave different names to his supplies on a daily basis, and people flocked to him. A considerable portion of this crowd dallied before the astrologer too. The astrologer transacted his business by the light of a flare which crackled and smoked up above the groundnut heap nearby. Again, that's it. This is all there is to the passage. Again, if at all, it will take you like 1 to 2 minutes is more than enough to read everything, absorb everything that's given in the passage. A narrative piece. Let's now focus on the questions one by one. All right, now in a way, this is a vocab as well as an inference question. The two combined together gives you this question, which is, which among the following is the word for the phrase bright and colorful in an impressive way. Now, all these 4 words are mentioned in the passage, but which word here refers to bright and colorful in an impressive way? Do you remember the information where we're talking about the description or appearance of the astrologer? And what we understand is that his forehead is dazzling, right? Because he has applied a bright vermilion color to it. So, can I say that the word dazzling strikes me the best, something that comes closest to describing bright and colorful in an impressive way? Option D here is actually the correct option choice. Flare refers to fire. So, it's not really that relevant here. Colorful, it does not really fit the bill for it. Sparkle again. I already have a better context in which the word dazzling is used. So you can eliminate option C, and again option A you can eliminate. This is a very good question. This could appear to be tricky for some of you. So I will not say this is easily scoreable, but if you are really good at inference, then this would become easy for you. All right. Correct option here will be option D, dazzling. We will focus on the next question. Now, which among the following is not a trade or occupation represented in the pathway running through the town hall park? Now, according to me, this is a majorly flawed question because there are 4 professions that we learn to remember from the passage. One was that of magician, one was that of medicine sellers, then we also have sellers of stolen hardware or junk, and then we also had auctioneers of cheap cloth. So if at all I had to eliminate anything, I would have eliminated option B. Unfortunately, the CLAD consortium, as far as their final answer key was concerned, marked C is the correct option choice. But to me, all the 4 options are absolutely correct. And if I had to eliminate anything, I would eliminate option B. But I'm just telling you, this is what the consortium marked as the correct option choice. Now, the next question, absolutely scoreable, very easy. It's the groundnut seller, the groundnut vendor who gives these different fancy names to his supplies on a daily basis, which is Bombay ice cream, Delhi almond, Raja's delicacy. And right off the bat, option D here is the correct option choice. It's a question you can solve through a selection itself. You need not eliminate the rest of the options. Let's take a look at the next question. Again, a synonym-based question. Vociferousness means to be very vocal about something, to talk about something in a loud and confident manner. And having said that, option A, when you read it, you know it is the correct option choice. Expressing opinions or feelings in a loud and confident way. This is the correct option choice. Words that are spoken or sung to have a magical effect. Now, this goes off the tangent. This is out of context, right? The magical effect bit. Willing or prepared to do something out, to hang about aimlessly, which means dallying actually. Dallied is the word which is used for this, but we have to look for an option which is a synonym for vociferousness, hence option A. Let's take a look at the next question. When did the astrologer usually start his day's business? And right at the outset, this is what is mentioned, punctually at midday. And the correct option choice here will be option C. This was the level of difficulty of the question. This is so easy that even if you do make a silly mistake here, for whatever reasons, that would be a big blunder, right? So option C here is the correct option choice. A very, very easy passage, except for that one question where I feel the question in itself is flawed. I think all the questions are very easy to score. And the last question, what was considered as a prophetic light by the simple clients of the astrologer? This is something that I have explained as well, which is the gleam of the eyes of the astrologer, the sparkling eyes of the astrologer with an abnormal gleam, like I mentioned. And this is the correct option choice. This is what the simple clients, took as a prophetic light. And this is what made them feel that the astrologer is perhaps a very smart person, right? He was very astute, actually. When you actually read the entire story, is very astute. So correct option choice here will be option B. This again is a direct question. You just need to locate this part and you'll understand which option here is the correct option choice. Eliminate the rest of the options. In total, you can easily get a 5 on 6. 5 on 6 is except for that one flawed question for which we can't do anything. And in total, reading the passage was 2 minutes, solving the questions another 2 to 3 minutes. So you can easily solve this passage in 5 minutes. Very easy passage, very interesting to read also, something that does not really make you feel very exhausted. That's a good beginner also, good starter to an exam, right? We will now focus on the last passage. The last passage again talks about education, right? And we will just read it. It talks about how education should be given to a child instead of imposing ideals or fixated conventions on the children. It's better to let them, to observe them, analyze them, and accordingly, think about the needs of children. All right. In terms of education, everything is education oriented here in the passage. Again, this is a very simple read, slightly, if at all, slightly more complex. I will not even use the word complicated than the rest of the passages, the first three passages. So, the right kind of education consists in understanding the child as he is. What did I say, right? Without imposing upon him an ideal, a fixed idea of what we think he should be, right? Because if you enclose him in the framework of an ideal, right, you will end up encouraging him to conform, right, which breeds fear and produces in him a constant state of conflict between what is and what he should be, right? And all inward conflicts have their outward manifestations in society, right? Which is, a child can become aggressive. It could be anything. Again, I'm not trying to infer some random piece of information. I'm just telling you this is how you understand passages in flow. If the parent loves the child, this is what a parent is expected to do. He observes him, he studies his tendencies, his moods and peculiarities. It is only when one feels no love for the child that one imposes upon him an ideal, for then one's ambitions are trying to fulfill themselves in him, wanting him to become this or that. If one loves not the ideal but the child, then there is a possibility of helping him to understand himself as he is. So loving a child means observing the child, analyzing him, studying his tendencies, not imposing anything on him, letting the child be so that the child also understands who he or she is. This is all there is, and that I can clearly memorize from the first paragraph. Read the second paragraph now. According to the author seems very opposed to ideals because to him, ideals are a convenient escape, and the teacher who follows them is incapable of understanding his students and dealing with them intelligently, right? Any teacher who follows ideals blindly, right? For him, the future ideal, the what should be, is far more important than the present child. The pursuit of an ideal excludes love. And without love, no human problem can be solved. So, love as an element is really important in studying a child. If the teacher is of the right kind, he will not depend on a method. He will not impose any ideals, right? But will study each individual pupil. In our relationship with children and young people, we are not dealing with mechanical devices. They're not robots, right? That can be quickly repaired, but with living beings who are impressionable. So children are impressionable, volatile, sensitive. Some characteristics are mentioned here. Afraid, affectionate. And to deal with them, we have to have great understanding of the needs of the children, how they think. The strength of patience is also a requirement. So great understanding is what we need to deal with the children. The strength of patience and love is required. When we lack these, we look to quick and easy remedies. When we lack what? When we lack strength of patience, understanding and love, we look to quick and easy remedies and hope for marvelous and automatic results. If we are unaware, mechanical in our attitudes and actions, we fight shy of any demand upon us. That is disturbing, and that cannot be met by an automatic response. And this is one of the major difficulties in education. Now, you might find the last statement slightly complex, but you can let it be. You just wait for a question to come up on it. But broadly speaking, I think we've already understood the idea. This passage is quite descriptive in nature. What needs to be done, what is expected of a teacher and a parent toward his or her child is what is mentioned in the passage at large. We'll now focus on the questions one by one. The first question. According to the passage, why do we look for quick and easy remedies and hope for marvelous and automatic results? Look at option A, because children are impressionable, volatile, sensitive, and affectionate. Let me tell you, in order to solve this question, you have to focus on the last paragraph. And the last paragraph does tell us about the different characteristics of the children, in that they're impressionable, volatile, sensitive. But does that directly lead us to hope for marvelous and automatic results? Absolutely not, right? That's the wrong causal relationship that we are trying to derive here. So option A is out. Because of major difficulties in education, do we look for quick and easy remedies and hope for marvelous and automatic results? Absolutely out. Because we lack intelligence and skills? Out. What you need to do in order to solve the question is that you need to locate this, and this is rightly given in the last paragraph. Then you read the context in which the statement is given, and you will be able to understand that the reason why we look for quick and easy remedies is because we lack understanding, patience, and love that's explicitly mentioned in the passage, and therefore option D is the correct option choice. This is a very easy question, full 1 mark you can easily score here. We will focus on the next question. What does the passage highlight as the quality of a parent who really desires to understand his child? Option A, they look at the child through the prism of an ideal. That's absolutely contrary to the idea. It's explicitly, again, directly mentioned that they observe and study the tendencies, modes, and peculiarities of the child. And this is the quality of a parent who really desires to understand his child or loves his or her child. Option B, again, is the correct option choice. This is something you can solve through selection technique itself. Selection technique in that you need not look at the other options and keep on eliminating them, although that's considered a very rightful sort of approach to solving questions. But here you can take that liberty because the level of difficulty of the questions itself is that low that here you can just go for the selection technique. C says they love their child to become someone great as per their ambitions. Again, this is like such a paradoxical statement. If they want the child to become something which is, in consonance with their ambitions, don't you think they're being imposive again? So option C is out. D says encourage the child to find out what she is, but more important than that is for the parent to study the tendencies first. So option B is better than option D. Focus on the next question. Again, a vocab related question. This time they are asking you to figure out the antonym or the opposite of the word volatile. Now, volatile is quick tempered. If I have to tell you the meaning of the word, somebody who has a volatile temperament is somebody who's quick to become angry. Volatile is very rapid, right? There are a lot of fluctuations to it. So fluctuating. So antonym would be stable, definitely. Steady is also another great antonym. And constant is also an antonym. Again, here the correct option will be all of the above. Again, very easy. Full scorer question is this. Focus on the next question. Which of the following currently reflects the intention of the author of the passage? Now, what is the author's intention or the purpose of the passage? In order to answer this question, I will not suggest that you pre-think. It's better to start looking at the options one by one. Option A says the right kind of education for a child cannot be without love, care, and understanding. I will not say that off the bat. To me, this seems absolutely accurate, but it's not a bad option. So I will not eliminate it right now. I will hold on to option A. I will just go through the rest of the options and see if I can find a better one. B says true education should be governed by a tendency to conform a child to our idols. This is absolutely opposite the information given in the passage, right? So option B is out. C, the teacher should focus on how a child should be according to her methodology. Again, the teacher who loves the child will study each child differently. He will not be imposing on the child. So again, option C is out. D says parents and teachers should work together collectively to guide a child on what he should do as per their ambitions. Again, this last part is flawed. To guide a child to do something as per the ambitions of the parents is again to conform the child to a certain ideal, which is not what is being spread as a message in the passage. Option D is out. We're left with option A, and this is the correct option choice here. Again, this is also an easy question to solve. If you are good with your elimination game, this becomes a very scoreable question again. And we will now focus on the next question. In light of the above passage, what will be the result of forcing a child to conform to the framework of an ideal? And the correct option choice here will be option B. It will create confusion and fear in the child. Again, these are keywords that are mentioned in the passage, a direct question. So again, this is very scoreable. A says it will make the child an ideal child. Absolutely out of context. The child will get into a conflict. Don't you think option B is much better than option C? D says will discourage the child to conform to the ideal. See, conforming to the ideal is not the ideal or goal anyway. So in no way is it going to discourage the child. So option B here is a correct option choice. The last question, according to the author, what should be the attitude of a right kind of teacher, right? Let's go through the options one by one. They should not empathize with the students. B, they should use modern and scientific methods of teaching. One thing I can tell you is I did not see modern and scientific methods being talked about. So option B is out. C says they should focus on studying each student individually, right? Focus on the pupils individually is what is mentioned also. This here is a correct option choice, option C. See, this is the beauty of practicing a lot of questions on a daily basis, that you are in a position where you're able to memorize information. And then this reduces the need to go back to the passage, especially when you are faced with passages so easy in nature. D says they should instill great ideals in the students. Again, this is a distortion. This is not implied, right? And this is also out, that they should not empathize with the students. If anything, they should be feeling what the students feel. Empathizing with the students is an underlying idea, even though not explicitly mentioned. But option A is absolutely the opposite. Hence out, correct option is option C. So if you notice the entire paper, if I have to talk about the level of difficulty of CLAT 2025, this has been really very, very easy to solve. A good score would be close to 22, 23. So that's it. Hope you like the video. Any doubts are welcome. Any clarifications you require, you can connect with us.